first house in Rochester in 2010. And I've kept a garden everywhere I've ever lived, so this place was no exception. It was in the middle of the city, but it had a little postage stamp of a backyard just big enough for a small kitchen garden. And when I planted the garden that year, I thought about putting in some asparagus. And asparagus, as you may know, is perennial. It keeps coming back every year. But it takes about 3 years of growth before it's mature enough for you to harvest anything. I was fairly certain I wouldn't be in that house for more than 3 years, so I didn't plant any. Well, life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and I ended up staying in that home for 7 years. My now husband moved in with me. We adopted 3 dogs in that house. We had a baby there. And every one of those 7 springs, after more weeks of brutally cold and snowy winter than any human should reasonably endure, tiny signs of life would start emerging. Snow would melt, birds would appear, the hardiest of plants would poke their little bodies up through the still solid ground. We humans would grasp onto every promise of the warm days to come, and I would dream about asparagus. I could have done more than dream. I could have enjoyed years of fresh asparagus, that light and woody first taste of spring, holding all the promise of a verdant tomorrow in its little stalk. If I'd only had the generosity of spirit to have planted it for somebody else. That's part of why we come to church, I think. To learn to be the person who plants when she might just leave it for someone else. To have a place that calls me to send out roots to be watered, even long after I'm gone. I'm so glad to be with you today. I'd ask if you would rise in body or spirit now as you're willing and able, and join with me in singing hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. I invite you now into a time of centering, followed by some shared silence. By shared silence, of course, I mean the absence of grown-ups talking, so that we can listen more deeply to all those sounds of life, our fidgets and our coughs, and the noises that our beautiful children make, and our breath, and that still small voice inside of us. So make yourself comfortable in your seat. Take a deep breath and release it with a sigh. The saline solution we give people through their veins in the hospital, my nurse partner explains to me, is salty for a reason. It matches the mineral content of the waves of water, plasma, blood inside of us. The inside of us, he goes on, is salty for a reason. It matches the mineral content of the primordial seas, where our ancestors first sprang to life. Those ancient waters of the deep, briny seas of life still rise and ebb in us. Our tears, our sweat, our blood are our grandmothers and their grandmothers and theirs. Back and back and back to grandmother microbe, who floated in the very same sea that flows in us. Back and back and back to grandmother earth, whose sacred waters held us, hold us, and will hold the great mystery yet to come. I ask you to join me now in a time of shared silence. tell you another story. One of my favorite theologians, Howard Thurman, told this one. One morning, he was walking down a country road in Georgia, and he spied a farmer working in the field along the way. The farmer was an elderly man, and he was planting little seedlings a few feet apart in the field. Dr. Thurman wandered over and saw that he was planting pecan trees. He wondered at this. He knew that pecan trees are slow growing. It often takes a decade or more before they bear any fruit at all. And this man looked to be quite old. So Dr. Thurman said to the farmer, "Those are pecan trees." And like a typical farmer, he kept at his work while answering, "Yep." Dr. Thurman pushed on. "They take at least 10 years to mature." "Yep," said the farmer, digging away. Dr. Thurman got a little more forward. "You must be nearly 90 years old." The farmer looked at him for a moment. "Yep." "Why do you plant pecan trees?" Thurman pressed on. "You know it will be many years before they bear anything. You'll probably never live to gather a single nut from these trees." The old man stopped at that point, and he looked Dr. Thurman in the eye, and he said, "All my life, I've eaten fruit from trees I did not plant. The one who plants only for his own harvest has no faith in the future." This is the story that comes to mind when I think about my own asparagus. Any faith I have in the future, whether I nourish it or not, it turns out is all tied up with faith in others. I made a decision to plant asparagus on any future patch of earth that I might call mine. I did that in our house in Albany just this year, even though I knew we were moving on soon. I know I'll never taste it, but I have hope that someone will, maybe generations of someone's. I'll do the same in our new Rochester house, even though I'm not sure how long we'll be there. Now this isn't just a reflection about how much I love asparagus. I want to be the kind of person who plants asparagus. Ours is a faith that calls us each to be that kind of person. Someone who plants for the future. People who think generationally about our choices. People who, in spite of potentially having nothing to gain, plant our hopes in the world. I'm only here at this church for a short while. My work here, our work together, is a time-limited ministry. And really, when we think about it, all our work is time-limited ministry. We're all heading sooner or later in the same direction as that old farmer. But I'm here to say this morning that I'd like us to plant asparagus together, because I'm all in. I'd like us to be a people who are all in, without regard for the time we have left. I'd like us, holding the knowledge that the future is uncertain, and that leave-taking is part of life, to put down roots anyway. I believe that together we can plant our hopes and plans and intentions for a world that will live beyond us. When we direct our generosity toward the future, toward the unknown, anything becomes possible for us. I want us to grow a church that lives long beyond any of our little lives. I want us to grow such a love within ourselves that, like those salty primordial waters, it lives longer than our own bodies. I want us to work together to grow a more kind, more peaceful, more just world, not only for ourselves, but for a long and flowing stream of generations beyond us. I'm all in, friends, and I hope you're with me. May it be so, and amen.
a welcoming place. With the deeds we accomplish, we find our grace. In one world, connected by nature so vast, we now plant these blessings, may they ever last. Now plant these blessings, may they ever last. We are one, we are many, may peace be our guide, as we offer each hope, with love by our side, with the dreams of the children and the fruits of the past. We now plant these blessings, may they ever last. We now plant these blessings, may they ever last.
This morning we celebrate our water communion. And so in a moment I'll invite you all to come forward to pour water that you may have brought with you into a common bowl on the table here. If you hadn't brought water, there is a pitcher on the table with which you can pour, or a little cup if you have maybe smaller hands. And I would ask you when you come up to speak into the microphone in just one or two words, the source of your water. You can use the water on the table symbolically, or maybe it is a deeply cherished source, knowing that it comes from our own church kitchen sink. And together we'll fill the bowl with our common water. So I invite you to come forward at this time to pour your water into our bowl.
This little bottle of water represents a tiny stream coming from a tiny little spring on the property that is known where we live. And that little stream flows into the Irondequoit Creek, flows into Irondequoit Bay, Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence River, and the world. We are connected by that little stream to the world.
This water is from my cat's water dish. And he has been the best pet I could ever ask for. He's me at the door every day when I get home for 12 years.
That's the first.
This is from Avalanche Lake in Ann Arbor.
This is a water bottle that I shared a drink from the day I graduated from Syracuse University on Mother's Day 2012 with an uncle and a grandfather who have since passed, Grant and my mom. We bought this for me. I only have a little bit though.
My water comes from a cruise ship that was parked in the harbor of Havana, Cuba a few weeks ago.
Hi, this part represents Cuba Lake, and if it wasn't for Cuba Lake in 1977, I wouldn't be here today, in this area anyway.
This water comes from our backyard goldfish pond, which in addition to the goldfish supports 2 beautiful water lilies and 3 small frogs. We are so fortunate. Water out of the faucet.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit of a gimmick, but we were in New Mexico this summer visiting our lovely daughter-in-law and our son, and there was no rain except for one day while we were there, and everybody was so surprised at the one day of rain because it was not seasonal. It was before the time they normally get their rain, so it's very strange to be in a desert kind of environment when we have this to enjoy here. So this is for New Mexico.
Right. This water is my parents' new house up in Gypsum Hills. So it kind of represents new beginnings and also the fact that when I was done filling this, I was able to turn the water completely off. So here's to no more leaky faucets.
This is Canandaigua Lake water in a little bottle that says salt water. Maybe some of you who were a part of the church a few years ago have these little bottles we were given to keep water for the summer. I love it. And Canandaigua Lake is the centerpiece of our town and our prosperity and the reason family come to visit us, like Andy Gordon, who is Bob's son, who's with us today. So thank you, Lake.
Every year, Maureen and I spend a week together at Chautauqua at the Yu House. And this water comes directly from the kitchen tap. Yu House at Chautauqua.
It's a wonderful place. I always come back restored and hopeful. Yeah.
This water is from the Atlantic Ocean in a place, well, it's actually from the harbor in a place called Mousehole, spelled Mousehole, in Cornwall, in the United Kingdom. And it also represents the water in Land's End, which is the westernmost part of the UK. It also represents Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which was where my girls and I spent time.
So I have water in a different form, ice. And this represents family because this past May I went to an ice hockey game with my 2 sons-in-law and my brother-in-law. And it was a game of Denmark against Finland. It was in Denmark and Denmark won.
This water is from a faucet in Rochester that he recently moved to.
Welcome.
Although rain disrupted some summer activities, I'm so grateful for a green place to live. It's fantastic.
This is represents water from my mom and dad's house in Buffalo, where I've been with my sisters this summer, sorting and sorting and sorting in preparation to sell the family home.
Watch out back there, because all this water makes me want to go to the bathroom. This water represents our grandson Simon, who we visited in Virginia, and to whom we had the opportunity to teach a lesson on life when we had water balloon wars.
It's the first time that our grandchildren ever had water balloons.
Oh, it's fun.
And then this water for me, besides that, represents the water that we need to preserve and not let it get any warmer and the seas rise any higher. And it's the reason that I work so hard with Citizens Climate Lobby. And that was a lot of my summer. So that's the water for me.
For me, this water represents time spent with 2 of my closest friends up in the Adirondacks near Whiteface Mountain for a bachelor party where I met a lot of new friends. and strengthening of friendships with a new tournament partner and a long friendship ahead.
It also comes from Hemlock Lake via our pipes under the roads and to our house, but it does come from Hemlock Lake, where I spent many summers with my grandparents skipping rocks and swimming, even though we weren't supposed to be swimming. And I now take my kids down to Hemlock Lake to swim, and the kids I care for too, so they can have that experience too. So we can all go out swimming.
This water represents Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where I went for a week with my kids, and especially represents the morning that my daughter and I got up very early to stand on the beach as the sun rose and the dolphins were leaping over the waves. And if you know anything about my relationship with my daughter, which has been rocky at times, we have an amazing relationship. This is water from a pond in my childhood home in Hemlock that we affectionately called Lake Bob. It's a really big pond that my dad had dug that just made him so happy. And it's been a very family-oriented summer. My dad had a stroke and I had my first child and my sister had her first child. So lots of, we all are busy doing our own thing, but this summer has been a very kind of inward family together summer. So this is for dad and kids. This water is from Canandaigua Lake, one of my favorite places on earth that I've been coming to since before I've been born, and from the Virgin Islands, where everyone is still rebuilding, and we're hoping for calm seas this winter.
We offer a blessing over this water, a litany written by Ranwa Hamami. And the response will be, this water is sacred, after each line. This water is sacred. It is made sacred by the many hands that have poured it with intention and love, the many stories that each drop contains, the many lives surrounding it in this unique moment, connected by commitment and faith. This water is sacred. May it continue to flow through this community with shining reflections of the unique gifts that flow through each of its members.
This water is sacred.
May it continue to nurture this community with sustaining hope that we journey together through ripples of growth and change.
This water is sacred.
May it continue to bless this community with loving reminders of our collective responsibility to one another and to the world.
This water is sacred.
May its ripples be a reminder that changes and growth within this community bring movement and transformation to the world beyond our doors.
This water is sacred.
May its purity offer grace to our community and the willingness to forgive ourselves and one another when we make mistakes.
This water is sacred.
In moments when we are confused or uncertain, may it bring us clarity of purpose and commitment.
This water is sacred.
In moments when the reservoirs of our hearts and spirits are drained by sorrow or pain, may it nourish them with the knowledge that we are surrounded by a deep and abundant love.
This water is sacred.
This water is sacred. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join with me in singing hymn number 121, We'll Build the Land.
Hands your elbows and help extinguish the chalice. Extinguish the flame,
but not like the truth, but the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
stay firm in
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.